We're looking forward to a great discussion this morning. My name is Ahley Seiler. I'm with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Eastern Missouri. I'm here to talk a little bit about the collaboration that we have, which we call ABCTODAY School. So hope this morning was kicked off so nicely. I'm excited to continue this work and conversation with you all. Just sharing a little bit more about what we're doing in Eastern Missouri. So ABCTODAY Schools is what we call our collaborative. It's a community collective impact model. Hopefully most of you know that you all know it takes all of us to do great work in our communities. And so just a little bit though about Big Brothers Big Sisters and who we are as an agency. In the last several years we've really taken a different focus on what we consider our purpose. Because of the expansion of the programs and services that we're providing to young people. So our purpose is to partner with young people in their pursuit of a meaningful, stable, and independent life. We serve now age 5 to 25, so we even serve through post-secondary in what we call a Big Futures model. I have a colleague who's with me today who's in that work, and she's actually attending some other sessions just to learn from the awesome colleagues that we have here for this conference. But we have really 6 different things in which we're doing. Obviously the core of Big Brothers Big Sisters work is one-to-one mentoring. We've also stepped into a group mentoring space, really because of the collaborative work that we do with ABCTODAY Schools, and I'll get to that in that story. We do ABCTODAY Schools, first job, system navigation, direct aid, and then Big Future. So those are sort of the umbrella of the programs and services that we provide to families and youth within our catchment area, which is Eastern Missouri. So we have St. Louis, St. Charles, all the way down to Cape Girardeau. So it's about a 2-hour difference. We serve that capacity. So ABCTODAY components. So just to give you a little perspective, we started working with schools about 15 years ago, and it really came out of the understanding that to really provide great service to our young people, we had to know about all facets of their life, not just how the mentoring relationship was between their big brother and big sister and little brother and little sister, but like how are they doing at school? And so we entered this conversation with our schools, and after our board really pushed us to understand from a third party, how do we look at real data to improve outcomes, and how does that really reflect on the work that we're doing. And so after about 9 months of meeting with our education experts, because we're in social service, not in education, so we're not the experts in that field, they really came to us and said, we think that if you're serious about this, you need to look at what we call ABC. The students' attendance, their behavior, and course performance. Everything that we could read and research also all told us that that was the right path, right? There's so many things that you can look at, but really the indicator of lifelong success are those 3 things: attendance, behavior, and course performance, particularly in reading and math. And so we've collected that data on our little brothers and little sisters, but along the way our school district said, this is so awesome, but you work with 250 kids and we have 4,000 in our district. How do we work collaboratively with you to develop a model so that we can impact all 4,000 students, not just the 250 that you're serving? We still want you to do that, that's great, but how do we bring more people together to provide greater service? So we essentially came up with our ABCTODAY model that has 3 components. The first component of that is putting together an ABCTODAY Network. So it's made up of a group of community partners responsible for really leading the response to student data. The second component of that is obviously the data. We have to see the data to be able to understand what's happening in schools. Each quarter, the school districts send us this data on attendance, behavior, and math and reading. Obviously, it's high-level collective data, so we don't see individual student data, but we see groups of students, cohorts of students, how they're doing. And then finally, we have what we call an ABCTODAY cycle. So after you get the data, what do you really do with it? Those are sort of the 3 components. We say that we first have to celebrate students. Second, we have to clarify, which means like we have to understand the data. Like, where are the data points that the schools are really struggling with? Where are the groups of students that are outperforming other students, and then how do we really customize a response, particularly for the students or the schools that need extra support and services brought into that. So what this looks like, so just a snapshot. I'm going to give you a lot of nuts and bolts, and then we're going to have time for questions at the end. So each network meets 4 times a year. So that means that we meet at the beginning of the school year to talk about what are the school's priorities, what are the challenges that the school can already anticipate facing during that school year. And then we meet each quarter afterward to review data. So we'll get first quarter data. That group will meet. We'll get second quarter data. Again, we'll meet. And then at the end of this, toward the end of the school year, after the end of the third quarter, we'll meet again. Again, we focus on celebrating the students in the school and successes first. So examples of this might be that we're sending as a collective letters home to parents, celebrating students whenever their students are identified as a student of the month. It could be that we're rewarding students if they're making improvements or they're accomplishing things at school through letters and presentations and things like that, recognition at school assemblies. And when I say that the network does that, it's the individual network partners at each of the schools who are doing that. So each network at a school is put together based on the needs of the school. So in our model, we have business representatives, we have faith-based representatives, we have other social service partners. Mentoring is a seat at that table, as obviously Big Brothers Big Sisters. We value mentoring and think it's really important in schools. Parents have a seat at that table, as do students. So students are engaged in conversations about how do we celebrate other students in the building, what things are meaningful, and then as a group of adult members, we're making that happen within each of the school buildings that we're in. Then we work with schools to develop strategies to impact students' performance with the emphasis on building positive school culture and attendance. Because of all the things that we're tracking, attendance, behavior, and math and reading, attendance is where we think we have the most influence, right? If we're building a positive school culture within each of the schools that we're operating, then hopefully students will develop a sense of belonging, want to come to school, want to be there, and attendance will improve. So we do things like attendance challenges. It could be between cohorts of grade levels and things like that. And it could be doing book drives, it could be career fairs, all of the things that you can imagine in schools that schools are trying to do, but are like, I really want to do this, but I don't have the time or the capacity, or nor can I ask my staff to do one more thing. It's the network of ABC partners who are coming together to say, oh my gosh, we'll do that for you. Let us organize it. We'll bring in our own networks, our own community relationships to really fulfill what you want to happen during the school year. But the most important thing is that there's a constant engagement and communication with school partners to support them. So it's a very fluid organization of these partnerships, so that if a school principal has something that pops up in a moment's notice, or a teacher does, they can reach out to a school partner that sits on their network and says, I have a family that's really struggling and they might need this. Is there anyone can help? Or they might send out an email or communication to the collective and say, I'm really looking for this. This came up. Is there anyone that can provide this or anyone that can do this? Or we have a volunteer opportunity that's coming up. So that's sort of what it looks like throughout each school year when we're working in the schools. These are just some examples of things in the last year. Just a few pictures paint a better picture than me trying to tell you about this, but obviously during the pandemic, food distribution was huge for our schools, and so community partners would come together not only to organize food, but to provide food and give it out to folks when school was not in session, so that could happen. We do lots of individual student celebrations. So here's a young student who celebrated for her improvement in her attendance, so she's proudly promoting that certificate that we were able to share with her. And then things like developing stickers or ways to celebrate students in front of other students so that they can be showcased and highlighted. And then again, that builds sort of curiosity among students. Like, oh my gosh, that student was able to be recognized for coming to school more often. I want to be able to be recognized. And often we're bringing in our partners to do that with us as well. Additional things that have sort of come out of this ABC Collective. As I mentioned, group mentoring, and I'll just give a brief example. At our junior high in our local school, we had a new principal that came in, and in our engagement with schools, one of the first conversations that we have with principals is just how do we get to know them? How do we get to understand what their strategies, their philosophies are for their building, their priorities? And one of the things that our principal mentioned in our first meeting with them is like, we have this huge need for young boys, particularly boys of color in our school. They're not experiencing, they're not getting the school experience that we hope, and we know they need a lot of support. At the time, there was a mentoring program that had left the school that had a group philosophy or a group strategy, and so we entered into that space with the help of that network of people at that school, who happened to be a church and a bank. Those folks said, we'll help you make this happen, right? Like, we know men that can step in to be group mentors for these young men, so we launched our first group mentoring cohort last spring, the spring of 2021, again in the midst of the pandemic, to hopefully create support for that group of young men that we knew really needed it. Additionally, we're entering the space of intensive supports for students. So the schools are helping us identify individual students within their school building that need extra support. And our agency then is providing a staff member to work alongside those families and students, even if they're not being mentored, to receive additional services. So connecting them to resources in the community, connecting them to the network of individuals who sit at that ABCTODAY table to get services like mental health services. It could be housing services. As we know, as we've grown to know that we have to serve the whole family to really serve the child. That we have to be able to stabilize the family to stabilize the young person. And if we're not doing that, then we're missing the boat in a big way. And then again, I think going back to that navigation and direct aid. So trying to identify collectively how we bring real services to schools to support families individually and collectively. So whether it's a housing resource or whether it's a mental health resource, we've been able to work with our local mental health facility to provide a staff member who is dedicated to a school building to do in-school therapy for students throughout one entire school day because of the barriers of transportation and all the things that you all know about that limit our families from being able to access some services. So we do have some outcomes, just a little bit about the number of the students that we work with. We began in our Cape Girardeau location with one school. Our district quickly told us that they wanted us to go to all 9 schools. So we have 9 schools operating in our Cape Girardeau location. And then we have 9 additional schools in our St. Louis area that we're working with in St. Louis Public Schools and then University City Schools. So last year we collected data and worked with about 7,600 students. We have over 160 partners between those 18 schools. I know it says 19 there, but we've actually lost one school that shut down. It was closed after the impacts of the pandemic as well. We have 234 students who are matched in mentoring relationships. And then when I talked about group mentoring, that's where it says PAC. We have 20 young men involved in that. And then we're working with 54 young people in intensive support. So I actually have this report that I can share with you before you leave if you're interested in my business card. It's just been really cool to see during the last few years how people have been able to put aside their work for a second. And when I say that, I don't mean their work isn't important, but when we have these groups of people and then we entered a real crisis like the pandemic, we were able to say very quickly, okay, we all just need to come together and figure out how we support the school. Let's just put our work down, let's put our own outcomes aside for a second, and let's just talk to the school about what they need, and let's just come together and be there to do that. So it's been really cool to see people doing that based on the model that we had established going into the pandemic. I feel like it made it a little bit easier for us to be able to have those conversations, and for people, because of the relationships that were built, were comfortable in doing that. So, and then here's just my information, my email information if you'd like to contact me at any point later after this conference to learn a little bit more about the work that we're doing. So I'll throw it over to Doug. Get that expanded.